The Supreme Court has once again stepped into the heart of one of America's most divisive debates, drawing national attention and igniting passionate responses from both sides of the aisle. The issue at hand is not just a matter of policy, but one that touches on the very fabric of American identity and constitutional rights. This week, the court handed down a landmark decision in Woolford versus Lopez, a ruling that could fundamentally reshape gun laws nationwide and set a powerful precedent for years to come. Legal experts are already calling it one of the most significant Second Amendment cases in recent history. The decision addresses how far states can go in regulating the types of firearms citizens may own for self-defense, raising new questions about the balance between public safety and individual rights. It challenges lawmakers to reconsider the scope of their authority and the limits of government intervention. For gun rights advocates, it's a victory, affirming a core constitutional right. Many see it as a long-awaited recognition of the Second Amendment's original intent and a safeguard against what they view as government overreach. For others, it's a setback that could undermine decades of gun control efforts, sparking fears about increased gun violence and making it harder for communities to enact measures they believe are necessary for public safety. The ruling forces state legislatures to re-examine bans on certain semi-automatic rifles and high-capacity magazines, compelling lawmakers to revisit existing statutes and potentially rewrite laws that have been in place for years. The debate is no longer theoretical. It's about what weapons are sold in local stores, what options are available to everyday Americans, and how communities will respond to a rapidly changing legal landscape. It also raises important questions for law enforcement, as police departments across the country must now adapt to new legal standards and determine what laws they can enforce, and how best to protect public safety under these evolving rules. This decision builds on the 2022 Bruen case, which focused on historical tradition in evaluating gun laws, but Woolford versus Lopez goes even further, challenging courts to look deeper into the nation's legal history and the original meaning of the Second Amendment. Woolford versus Lopez pushes the boundaries of the Second Amendment further than ever before, setting the stage for new legal battles and debates that will shape the future of gun rights and regulations in America for generations to come. The legal battle that would become Woolford versus Lopez began in the heart of Hawaii, a state known not only for its beautiful landscapes, but also for its uniquely strict approach to gun control. Hawaii has long enforced some of the toughest gun laws in the United States, with visible reminders at nearly every public building, signs prohibiting firearms, and rigorous security checks at entrances. It was here that Maya Woolford, joined by a group of concerned residents, decided to challenge the state's sweeping ban on many semi-automatic rifles and magazines capable of holding more than 10 rounds. They argued that these restrictions infringed upon their rights under the Second Amendment, which protects the right to keep and bear arms. Woolford and her fellow plaintiffs insisted that the firearms in question were not only common across the country, but also essential for lawful purposes such as self-defense and home protection. They believed that law-abiding citizens should not be deprived of these tools simply because of their features or capacity. On the other side, Hawaii's Attorney General Mateo Lopez stood firm in defense of the state's laws. He argued that these weapons, often associated with mass shootings, posed an unusual danger to public safety, and that the restrictions were both reasonable and necessary to protect the community. The case first went before a federal district court, which ultimately sided with the state, upholding Hawaii's right to regulate firearms in the interest of public safety. However, the legal landscape shifted dramatically after the Supreme Court's landmark Bruen decision, which emphasized a historical approach to evaluating gun laws. In light of this, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals reversed the lower court's ruling, finding that Hawaii's ban lacked clear historical precedent. This reversal created a significant split among federal courts, as other circuits around the country continued to uphold similar bans, leading to confusion and inconsistency in how the Second Amendment was being interpreted. Recognizing the national importance of the issue and the need for clarity, the U.S. Supreme Court agreed to hear the case, setting the stage for a potentially transformative decision. Woolford's challenge was now poised to become the vehicle for a ruling that could affect millions of Americans and shape the future of gun regulation across the nation for years to come. The Supreme Court's 6-3 decision in Woolford versus Lopez marks a pivotal moment in the ongoing debate over gun regulation in the United States. This landmark ruling has sent shockwaves through legal and political circles, fundamentally altering the landscape of firearm laws across the nation. In its majority opinion, the court ruled that the Second Amendment protects the right to own firearms that are in common use for lawful purposes. This includes not only traditional handguns, but also modern, semi-automatic rifles and standard-capacity magazines, which are now explicitly recognized as protected arms under the Constitution. Justice Clarence Thomas, writing for the majority, emphasized that states cannot enact sweeping bans on entire categories of firearms that Americans commonly choose for self-defense, hunting, or sport. He argued that such bans infringe upon the core rights guaranteed by the Second Amendment. The court's analysis found no historical tradition of banning popular firearms. Instead, historical regulations focused on especially dangerous or unusual weapons, not those widely owned and used by law-abiding citizens. Data presented to the court showed that millions of AR-15 style rifles and large-capacity magazines are currently owned by Americans nationwide. Their widespread presence in homes and communities was a key factor in the court's determination that these items are in common use. As a result, the ruling shifts the legal focus away from the specific features of a weapon and instead centers on how prevalent that weapon is among civilians. The more common a firearm, the more likely it is to be constitutionally protected. The court also abandoned the previous two-step analysis, which balanced public safety concerns against individual rights. Now, courts must rely solely on historical tradition when evaluating gun laws, making it much harder for new restrictions to pass constitutional muster. This new standard sets a significantly higher bar for states seeking to justify bans or restrictions on popular firearms, requiring them to demonstrate a clear historical precedent for such measures. As a result, many existing state and local gun control laws, especially those targeting widely owned firearms, are now constitutionally vulnerable and may face legal challenges in the months and years ahead. The majority opinion in Woolford v. Lopez sets a firm interpretation of the Second Amendment. The justices argued that the right to keep and bear arms is not subject to shifting legislative preferences. They compared banning the most popular rifle to banning the most popular book, unacceptable under the Constitution. The majority rejected the idea that AR-15s are weapons of war, calling them the modern equivalent of muskets for self-defense. Cosmetic features like pistol grips or adjustable stocks. They said, don't make a firearm unusually dangerous. The court dismissed interest balancing, declaring the Second Amendment itself strikes the balance. If a firearm is in common use for lawful purposes, it cannot be banned. The majority concluded that while gun violence is serious, disarming law-abiding citizens is not the solution. The three dissenting justices issued a strong critique of the majority's decision. Justice Sonia Sotomayor argued the court was ignoring real-world consequences and undermining public safety. The dissent called the common use test illogical, warning that popularity shouldn't determine constitutionality. They compared it to banning dangerous drugs or vehicles regardless of popularity. The dissent highlighted the destructive power of semi-automatic rifles, arguing the framers never envisioned such weapons. They urged judicial restraint, saying legislatures should address gun violence, not the court. The dissent warned the ruling would lead to more violence and death. The Woolford v. Lopez ruling sparked immediate polarized reactions. Gun rights groups celebrated, calling it a historic victory for freedom and a check on government overreach. Supporters argued millions of Americans use AR-15s responsibly for sport, hunting, and self-defense. They said bans unfairly punish law-abiding citizens for the acts of a few. Gun control advocates condemned the decision as reckless, warning it would dismantle common-sense safety laws in many states. Medical professionals and law enforcement leaders expressed concern about increased injuries and risks to officers. Critics argued the common use standard ignores the unique dangers of battlefield-style firearms. They vowed to pursue new legislative strategies to mitigate the ruling's impact. The ruling deepened the national divide over gun rights and public safety. The Woolford decision's impact will be felt quickly, especially in states with bans on semi-automatic rifles and large magazines. Legal challenges are expected to overturn these bans, allowing residents to purchase firearms like AR-15s for the first time in years. Gun owners in restrictive states will see a dramatic expansion of rights, and gun sales are likely to surge. The ruling doesn't eliminate all gun regulations. Background checks, waiting periods, and red flag laws remain. In permissive states, the decision acts as a shield against future restrictions. States must now update laws, retrain police, and manage the transition. Lawmakers may seek alternative regulations, like higher taxes, specialized training, or stricter storage mandates. The decision closes one door for gun control advocates, but opens a new chapter of legal maneuvering. The landscape of American gun law has shifted dramatically. Wilfred V. Lopez is not the final word on gun rights. It's the start of a new era of legal and political conflict. Lawsuits will challenge remaining restrictions, while states seek new ways to regulate firearms. The definition of common use will be hotly contested. How many must own a weapon before it's protected? Accessory regulations, like bump stocks, will also face scrutiny. States may try new laws requiring permits, insurance, or training for semi-automatic rifle owners. At the federal level, calls for new legislation or even Supreme Court reform may intensify. The courts now play a central role in shaping gun laws, ensuring the debate remains contentious. America's struggle to balance gun rights and public safety is far from over.